last time I did a video blog, I was fishing on a club water down on the south coast, and I had a pretty good session. I had 430s in a session, which was really good, but the trouble with that place is it was starting to get really busy. You know, I tend to fish midweek, I tend to fish a Sunday and Monday night, and there was 25 people on each night, which is absolutely ridiculous for the low stock water. At the weekends I was told there was sort of 35 people on there, which meant there was probably more lines in the water than there were fish present, which is especially the case if you consider all the amount of crack-offs that were going in there at the time. So I did one more session after those 4 fish, but it was just too busy, and I found myself walking around in the afternoon, and there was just no point in me walking around because there was nothing to walk around for. You know, that every decent swim was taken, and if one swim was becoming free, somebody had a barrow full of kit ready to move in it after him. So it just got to the point where I thought, well, this is not the sort of angling I want to do. I'm not really enjoying myself with these sort of numbers down here. So I decided to fish elsewhere. The trouble was, I've only got 2 tickets for this year, and one of them is for Burfield, which, if you watch my last blog, you'll probably know is not the same sort of water that it was last year, simply because of the bank space. They just, you know, we've only got a certain number of swimmers that we're allowed to fish, so most of the lake is completely free from lines, and the fish can do what they want to do. But I went down there at the start of May. It was the first sort of hot weather of the year. You know, the sun had come out and it was hitting sort of 25 degrees on one of the days. But when I got down there, it was quite busy, which was a little bit annoying. There was at least 4 bailiffs on, and one of them member, which pretty much wiped out all the, you know, all the sort of decent areas that were allowed to fish. But I did manage to drop in one swim that, in the end, put me in with a chance or 2. You know, the fish were certainly enjoying the bit of early season sun, and they were drifting around. I got a couple of fish feeding right in close, with my hook bait in amongst it, but they managed to do me completely. A couple of nice fish as well. And in hindsight, looking back at that session, I should have caught. I really should have caught. I made a couple of mistakes. I went walking around in the afternoon and do what I normally do to have a look see if there's any better options, and each time I got back to the swim, there was fish present in the swim, just drifting out in close on the shallows in front of me. So really, I should have stayed put in the afternoon and you know, made more of the stalking chances and the close-in chances that I might have got. And I also made a bit of a mistake at night. I didn't know the swim that well, so I fished all 3 rods at light looking areas, but they were in deep water, you know, from 8 to 9 foot up to, I think, one rod was in 12 foot. And really, I think if I'd put them in 6 foot of water or less, I would have had a chance that night. But you know, I could have caught hundreds of fish through hindsight over the years. But I think the busyness of that session, you know, that coincided with the hot weather, really did the fishing on Burfield a little bit, because, you know, as I say, the fish wanted to be in the area where the shallows and the channels are, and around that sort of area. I'd seen them around there a lot last year, but because when they tried to get in there at the start of May, there was just lines everywhere in the water, I think that put the fish off a little bit. So every time they tried to drift into the channels and drift into the dogleg and the shallows, there was always a couple of lines in the water, and they just backed straight off it into the main body of water, or around some of the other bays where there's just no pressure whatsoever. I mean, for saying it's such a big water, I've never seen fish so line shy. You know, I was watching them on a couple of occasions come swimming over a shallow bar, heading towards my lines, and even though my lines were backleaded, literally, you know, at a diagonal going down, they were coming across, seeing my lines, and either spooking back straight across the bar, or just turning off and shooting up further in the lake. So I just don't think they wanted to see the lines at all. So the fish visiting the 20 odd acres that we're allowed to fish were very few and far between. If you think about it, Burfield is 90 odd acres, so we've got 20 acres that we can fish, at least 70 odd acres that are completely left alone, and what's in the 20 acres that we can fish is pretty much in the rest of the lake. You know, there's still bays and channels, and certainly plenty of islands in the rest of the lake. So really, there's no need for them to visit the 20 odd acres. And the fishing was tough, but I was liking it because it wasn't too busy, and you know, I was left alone a little bit to my own devices. And I spent a hell of a lot of time walking around and looking in all the likely areas, but the fish just weren't there. And I ended up fishless for the first May that I can remember. You know, normally May is my favourite month to bank a few fish. Not always the big girls, but I normally bank quite a lot of fish in May. So this May was the first May that I've not really caught at all. I did find a couple of fish in early June sitting in the shallows, so there was 3, 4, 5. I had a little dabble for them, but then somebody else moved in, and that kind of, again, the pressure sort of ruined our chances a little bit, so I moved out of where I'd seen the fish and dropped into one of the passing swims. That evening I saw a couple of carp show. There was a lot of bream and tension from between the swim, but there was certainly a couple of big disturbances that looked more carpy. And the following morning I was woken up to a screaming take, but I was a little disappointed to land a tench from it. The tension there just seemed to give absolutely phenomenal takes and then just don't do anything in the fight at all. So I landed a tench, rebaited the rod, repositioned it, and an hour after that I saw a carp, definitely head and shoulder, pretty much over where I put the rod back. And an hour or so after that I got a take, not a screaming take, but just tight and straight up, just flicked it out the line clip, and I bent into solid resistance, and I knew this one was a carp. There was a stalemate for a few seconds as the carp used its weight just to hang there, and then it just started kiting, and I knew I had to get control of it pretty sharpish before it got round an island. So I just bent into it, gave it a lot of side strain, and put a lot more pressure on than what I like to, really. I've just managed to swing it past the island. It just kept kiting and kiting on a tight line. So again I had to give it a bit more pressure to get it around the next obstacle, and I managed to get it around that just. And then I got it in close in a sort of manageable area. But then it just kept going round the corner, and it just went round the end of the point, so I had to jump in the water to eventually land it. And well, I was really pleased with it, to be honest. It wasn't a massive fish by all standards, but it was a really dark looking fish, a little bit scarred up, and it looked really old. And I'm in two minds, well, I'm in two minds now, whether it was one of the really old stockies or whether it's one of the more recent introductions in there that's just had a bit of a tough life. But yeah, it was a nice fish.
Well, this is my first fish from Berkshire for the year. It's been pretty tough going. It's took me 11 nights to get it, but things have changed a little bit down here just recently. We can only fish a certain number of swims, so it's made getting on the fish very, very difficult. Half the time, there's a beat. Half the time we've just been watching the fish in other swims and out of range, but I was lucky enough to get this one. 33 pound, and he put up one hell of a scrap. Hooked it at longish range. It just kept kiting to the right, and I had to give him a bit of hammer to get him around a few obstacles, but as you can see I got him in the end. Happy days.
Shortly after putting the 33 back, I started to feel a bit ropey, and I had an absolutely terrible night on the bank. I wasn't well at all, and I had some serious chest pains, which got me sort of worrying for a little while. Stuck out in the middle of nowhere, but eventually, you know, the following morning, I sort of felt well enough to get the kit together, get it on the barrow, and take the hard journey back to the car park. Got myself straight down to the doctors, found out I had a chest infection, so that wasn't good. So the following week I didn't really get a chance to fish properly, and the week after that I started feeling a bit better. So I got myself back down the bank again, got myself in the swim that I caught the fish on. I couldn't really walk too far, I did a great deal. So I just got the rods out to the sort of areas where I'd caught from previously. I didn't see a fish, didn't see a carp, and no liners, no signs of them at all. So I pre-baited for the following week, and then turned up 5 days later for another go. I walked around everywhere that we were allowed to fish and just didn't see any signs of any fish whatsoever. It was just looking a bit barren. So I was just about to drop on the swim where I pre-baited, and I saw a coot come off the island, bob down and pick up one of my hook baits, followed by one of my freebies, sorry, followed by a couple more, and I just knew that there was no carp in the area that were willing to feed. So I just gave it up as a lost cause. But luckily I'd got myself another ticket on a lake nearby, and this is where I am now. It's a bit of a smaller lake, about 20 odd acres, but we can fish all the way around, and there's, barring the snags, there's nowhere the fish can hide. So I'm starting to like it on here. It's not too bad. And last week I saw the big gill, and got a feed on a handful of hybrid boilies in the back of the snags. Getting them feed in the back of the snags doesn't mean a great deal, but it was just nice to see her with her head down and really getting amongst the baits. And I pulled off the following day for work. Somebody moved in behind me and caught her at that swim at £49 an ounce. So you know, makes me wonder if I had a bit more time on my hands, if I could have got lucky with that one. But you can't win them all. But yeah, so what I'm going to do now is keep an eye on Burfield. If I come down on a really hot day and I can find a few fish on Burfield, I'm going to drop on there. If not, I'm going to come down and give this place a go, but we'll see what happens.